All right, we continue our segment dealing with this, we'll call it unit, dealing with evolution. And we began talking about how some of these organisms will change over time. I believe this was one of the last slides that yep, okay. So we're past this one. And in this video dealing with that of before the dinosaurs is what it's called, notice that some of these species that we ask that you write down are here, okay? And that is, yesterday we were introduced to that Hycoethes and that Cephalaspis. So what we see happening is this is probably the earliest ancestor of all vertebrates. And the reason we mention that is because that's the first species of an animal that had developed not only just that spinal cord, but a skeleton, as it stated, grew on the inside, or endoskeleton. Otherwise, the animals that have a skeleton on the outside, you saw those examples, the scorpions, called an exoskeleton instead. Then you saw that scorpion chasing this species called a Cephalaspis. And what happens is during that video, they're illustrating that it's like the Cephalaspis has this what we want to call it, extra set of sensory perception. It detects that there's some biochemical activity going on. It was the, I don't want to call it megascorpion. I don't know if it was brontoscorpio or what. It was a large type that grabbed the smaller one, and that has no idea that there's anything beneath there, because that Cephalaspis, as far as evolutionary terms is concerned, is by far way more advanced than that of the scorpion. Okay, so in most cases, it's not only just the strong will survive, like that of the scorpion, but being smart and having that type of intelligence is always going to be an advantage then as well. So that Hycoethes, we see development of new organisms from pre-existing ones. So this was the template, that very small fish, that then leads to the Cephalaspis. And as we proceed further, I'm trying to remember which one comes next. It may be the Petrolacosaurus, I believe, and then the Hynerpeton, then the Dictodon, then the Gorgonopsid. I believe that's the process that we go through. And then what we had you write down yesterday was another early ancestor of many modern reptiles and mammals was that Gorgonopsid. And what you will see is there's characteristics of both of them within that animal. Certainly a very large carnivore, but what you will see is that Gorgonopsid was a top predator of its time because of the positioning of its legs. What we see happening is as animals had evolved, the Hynerpeton, one of the earliest amphibians, yes, it was a tetrapod, 4 legs, but the ventral or anterior side of that animal scraped across the ground. And that's still a modern characteristic of these animals. They're also tied to water, amphibians are. So as evolution continued, then moving on to that of the reptiles, they could move on to land. They were no longer tied to water like that of the amphibians are, having to have that moist skin. So then when you get to the Gorgonopsid, it's more so mammalian-like with its limbs. They're more so placed directly underneath the animal, making it much faster. And having that type of speed would, of course, be an evolutionary advantage to, yes, not only outrun other predators, but being able to catch the assorted type of prey. And one of the things that what we see here, certainly an overpopulation can occur, and if that's the case, competition for habitat is always going to be an ongoing problem, but more so a food source. That can be a problem. I think we talked about blue tongue last week, and that was the example that we gave. So developing different types of traits that increases the chance for survival, of course, is going to be an advantage then as well. And that's what we refer to as genetic variation. And those advantages will then be passed on to its offspring. And there, that term is adaptations. And I think that's a quick summation of where we had left off, and then we continue with this here. So one of the things, going back to that cephalaspis, okay, organisms with adaptations are most likely to survive. Now, the reason for that is having what we call memory, being able to remember where it is that food sources may be located. Because having that as an adaptation would be a very large evolutionary advantage. So when we're talking about fitness here, okay, the contribution of that to the next generation, the more fit an animal is, well then, yes, you're going to be able to pass that trait, because you're alive to reproduce, to pass that successful trait on to the next generation. So one of the examples we gave in, was it last Friday, when we're talking about these two different types of bears, having that thick fur would not be an advantage living in Florida, and vice versa, taking the American black bear and putting that into polar regions. Okay? You would have to have that thick fur, and I think you would agree with that, living in colder environments. So probably what had happened is that, remember, we said that Gorgonopsid was an early ancestor for a lot of large carnivores. So whether the jaw musculature may change, the limbs may change, but the diet probably did not. And with that, what we see, even though Gorgonopsid was that of a reptilian descent, remember, a lot of these land masses were built together. When Pangea was starting to break apart, these animals would have to adapt to their various types of environments, whether it's because of habitat, whether it's because of food, or whether it's because of climate. Any one of those can lead to its fitness in being able to have those adaptations to increase its survival and being able to pass that trait on to the next generation. Okay, we will continue with the idea of adaptation versus acclimatization tomorrow. What I want to do is take a little bit of time. Remember, this is going to be an ongoing process of what we want you to think and visualize as we proceed further in this video. And what we're talking about here is this idea remember yesterday we had the Gorgonopsid up here, and we were trying to, let's say, explain the difference between, not coevolution, convergent and divergent evolution. But in this case, what we see here, this was the earliest ancestor of all vertebrates. So we've got this H. Okay, and since this was the earliest vertebrates, we know that through the evolutionary chain, what we would see with that is certainly going to be, they don't really discuss the birds much, but this was the first type of fish to evolve from this, and that was that cephalaspis. Okay. Then next, I believe, was it the hynerpetin, which I'm putting these down really quickly because I'm running a little short on time. But these are spelled right. But again, I'm just putting these up here very quickly. Then I believe it was the Petrolacosaurus. And that was maybe making the transformation from an amphibian-like animal, getting closer to a reptilian type. And what we would see here is finally the Dictodon and then the Gorgonopsid. So again, this is another type of tree that I would suggest that you write down, because we're going to start writing some of the characteristics in here that led to the development or evolution of those particular animals. Okay, so we will catch up to you next time.